Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Dating After Divorce podcast. I have a treat for you today. So, my fellow coach, Amanda Lauder, is here to share her remarriage story. Amanda is a sex coach for Christian women. Welcome, Amanda. Please tell the listeners who you are, what you do.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. So yes, I am a sex coach for conservative Christian women. I help women who feel like they're just never in the mood for sex, really, either they don't have pleasure or they just don't have desire, and help them learn to embrace their sexuality and love their sex life for them, not just for their husband.
Oh, the room got hot.
Yes. I love my job so much. It is so fun to talk about sex all day long.
Yes, ma'am. All right. Well, we're definitely going to get into that.
Yay.
And I have brought questions kind of from my own practice. I do have some clients who are conservative Christians, not all, but some, and they have questions around sex and what to do after being divorced and what to do with dating. So we'll get into that, but we want to hear your story first. You are remarried. Tell us a little bit about your current family.
Yes. So my husband, Kevin, and I have been married for almost 10 years. It's a second marriage for both of us. I was married previously for 13 years and had 3 children with my first husband. And he was married previously for 8 years and had 2 children with his first wife. So together we have a blended family of 5 kids. And right now they range in age from 13 to 22. So they keep us on our toes and very busy and crazy.
Yeah, this is the age that everyone stops talking about what's happening. Like when our kids are little.
So hard. It's so hard.
We don't have cute pictures to put on social media. No. We're doing everything wrong.
We're hanging by a thread here most of the time.
Yes. All right, listeners, check on your friends who have teenagers and young adults. We're not doing okay.
We are not doing okay.
So why did you get divorced? Like what happened? And, what can you share about your first marriage that led to a divorce? And what was your experience of a divorce like?
Yeah. So my marriage was pretty much not great for me from the beginning. It got really bad after I had my first child and continued to get worse as time went on. By the time we'd been married about 5 years, I was considering divorce pretty seriously. It was an emotionally abusive marriage. He could be very cruel. Our entire marriage revolved around my weight, my size, how much I exercised, how much I ate, all that kind of stuff. So, he had a lot of trauma that, we got married very young. I was 19. I'd been 19 for 9 days when I got married. So very young. And we just didn't understand the trauma that he had had from his childhood and how that would play out in our marriage. And he didn't realize the damage that he was doing, but it was doing a lot of damage to me. I went into the marriage pretty confident in myself. And by the end, I was pretty much a shell. So I'm very religious as my niche suggests. And so, it was really important to me to be constantly communicating with God about my marriage and what I needed to do. And so I started praying about that 5-year mark, about, divorcing him, and really felt like my answer was, now is not the time. And it wasn't a no, but it wasn't a yes either. It's just, now is not the time. And so I just kept putting in the time and trying to, I would go back and forth between accommodating his wishes, which even when I did, it was still not enough. And then completely getting passive aggressive and rebelling against what he wanted me to do, because doing what he wanted me to do still wasn't working. So doing
this was
what I wanted
weight,
to do,
like losing weight, eating, exercising,
yes, all of that. So it kind of came to a head in about 2010, where my mental health had deteriorated to the point where I was being medicated for both depression and anxiety. And, I nearly took my life. So I had a plan. I was ready to carry it out. The only thing that kept me from doing it was, that I had 3 children at that point, and I did not want to leave them with him because I didn't trust him. So that was really the only thing that kept me from taking my life at that point. And so some other things happened, and it was basic, he kind of realized what he was doing to me at that point. And, we got into therapy and stuff. And it was through that therapy that I finally got strong enough to leave. And in the spring of 2011, we'd been married for almost 13 years at that point. I felt like my answer from God changed, that he said, now is the time. Now is the time. So we were divorced officially in October 2011. So that's that
when
story.
you mentioned the kind of darkness that an emotionally abusive marriage can cause, this is not a unique situation.
No.
There is, and we hear a lot about like, well, he's not hitting you and he's not sleeping around. So like, what's the problem?
Yeah.
And this is the problem that's just so hard to articulate. Right. Because I know those moments where you're just like, this is not worth it. Many of my listeners, clients, and podcast guests have expressed just being near or in that darkness, that dark moment during an emotionally abusive marriage.
Yeah, it was terrible. I mean, like I said, I became a shell of a person. And, ultimately, I think, marriage is always hard. Even in the best of situations, it's always hard, but it shouldn't be that.
Right. 100%. There's a difference between the hard work of building something beautiful together.
Yes.
And then there's the hard work of what I refer to as a hostage situation.
Yes.
That's how I saw mine. I'm like, this is hard.
Yes. Yeah.
So what was your healing journey like after that?
Well, so, I mean, like I said, I was in therapy, and, when we got divorced, we were living in Texas at the time, and I moved back to Utah to be, near my family. So moved with my 3 children, moved in with my parents, and, was working. I hadn't found a therapist at that point, in Utah yet, but was still just, working on getting settled as a single mom and taking care of my children and figuring out all of the ins and outs of that. But I met my husband now, Kevin, just 6 weeks after my divorce was final. And I really think it was his unconditional love that healed me.
Wow. How did you meet 6 weeks after your divorce in the middle of a move?
Well, so I had moved to my parents before the divorce was final. So I'd been back in Utah about 2.5 months. I was going to a religion class for, they call mid singles, like, singles who are 30 to 45. So we're not like with the 18-year-olds who are single, and we're not with the 70-year-olds who are single. So it was a class specifically for mid singles. And it was just a way for me to, have a little break from my kids once a week. My parents were willing to watch my kids while I did that. And then, and to just meet other single people and make friends. And cause it's kind of a different story when I moved back to where I grew up and, would run into people that I went to high school with and stuff. And, they're all married and happy and, or, at least not showing that they're unhappy, but, and, here I am single. And so it's kind of a different crowd. So finding friends in that environment was really important to me.
Yeah. And so you guys met at this,
yes,
at this class.
Yes. Yeah.
Who made the first move? Like, what was happening in this class?
It was so funny. So he walked in, and it was literally like lights out, spotlight on him, angels singing. I was like, what the heck is going on? This was so crazy. And, I'd never seen him before. So, and I'm pretty outgoing and social. And so I just decided to introduce myself to him and ask if he was new. And, cause I like, whenever you're new and in a new environment, like it's so awkward to try and like, make the first move. And so I just, try to be kind to people. And so he said, yes, it was his first time. And so I invited him to sit with me and my friends. And so he sat next to me, and I wanted to touch him. it was like,
you're like, are you real?
This magnet. I wanted to, and I didn't, I held off. I mean, it wasn't appropriate. Like I'd barely met the man. But I just had this, it was like a magnet. I was so attracted to him. So after the class was over, we would typically, like, a bunch of us go out, to IHOP and get pancakes, you know, and for afterwards and socialize. And so I invited him there, and, we met there, or, you know, that was when we actually got to talk and start, you know, getting to know each other. And we just couldn't stop talking. It was, we were just so, you know, enamored with each other. Then after IHOP, a friend invited us over to his house to play pool and just hang out some more. And so we both went there and we just continued to hang out. And then it was about midnight and I was like, it's getting pretty late. And so he, you know, we were like, okay, we probably should head home. And he asked me for my number. And so I gave him my number, and we got in our cars and he called me right then.
Wow.
And we talked until he went to work the next morning. We literally talked all night long.
Wow.
And we fell in love very, very quickly.
Yeah. So many things in this story.
Yeah.
One, I just want to highlight the fact that he called you. And I want to say, ladies,
right.
If a guy has your number already, if he's interested,
he will call.
He will call you. Yes. And if he's not calling, it's because he doesn't want to.
Right. He's just not that into you.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. You guys talked all night. So like
all night
literally
long.
After talking all evening, you talked all night.
Yes.
So
yes.
Incredible.
And, you know, he went to work and we were texting throughout the day. And then, you know, we talked when he got home the next night, and it just blossomed from there.
Yeah. What did you talk about? Like, what did you find
everything.
in common so quickly?
Everything. We talked about everything. We both held nothing back. We were completely open and vulnerable with each other, sharing, you know, all the ins and outs of our divorces, but in a respectful way. But, you know, like this was my part in it. Like I'm taking ownership of my part in it. I saw someone who had similar values as I did, someone who had similar goals as I did, someone who was willing to work on himself as much as I wanted to work on myself. I personally feel like that is the key to a good relationship, is when you can, you know, when confronted with your own issues, do you blame others? You know, do you go into deep shame, or do you just say, yeah, okay, I see that and I'm going to work on it. Yeah. And that's what I saw in him, which was important to me, that he was willing to confront the things. Now, here's the funny thing. Okay. So he was married for 8 years. Those were the exact 8 years that I was praying about divorcing my first husband. And as soon as he separated from his wife, that's when my answer from God changed.
So your journeys were sort of tracking each other,
yes,
to make that moment happen where you were both single at the same time.
Yes. Wow. So we both feel very led by God to each other, that this was his work, his timing. Yeah. You know, my parents, when they found out that I was dating someone pretty seriously, like we were talking about marriage. I mean, we started talking about marriage within a week. Like we just knew. And my parents completely freaked out, which is understandable. I mean, as a parent, I'd be freaked out too, right? Like here is your daughter that's just gotten divorced and she's already talking remarriage, and it's just been a couple months. But, you know, my question to my parents was, you know, do you have objections to him? Like, I mean, I of course introduced him and he spent time with my family. And I said, you know, if you are seeing something in him that I am not seeing, please tell me. I need to know. If you have objections to the timing, that's not your call.
That's such a great question. Such an incredible question for everything.
Yes.
Because a lot of women who are dating, we've all been programmed with all these like checklist type things. And as a dating coach, I get so many of them coming at me, and it's always interesting to see them. One person will be like, well, he's a bachelor and he's never had kids, so he cannot be good. And I'm like, well, but are there any problems with the human that you were looking at?
Right.
Right. Or, well, he's been divorced and, he has 3 kids and I just don't know. I'm like, yeah, but what about him as a person? It's not the external,
right,
I guess, things that you're looking at, or the timing. It's not like there's this particular, here's how long you need to heal before you can get married. There are no formulas.
There's no formula.
It's really about the person that you're looking at. And that was really wise of you to have that perception and understanding. And I guess, and I don't know, did that come from having been through the divorce where everything still didn't work?
Yeah. I mean, my parents had let me know, that they had seen things in my first husband that they, had worried about, but they just trusted me and, just went with it. And, because, probably at 19 years old, I probably wouldn't have been as open to listening to them either. Right. I was so in love and enamored with that and, so immature at that point. And, but when, as, an older adult, I mean, I was 32, I guess, when I met, my second husband, that, I had a lot more perspective behind me. And, if there were genuine concerns that they had, I wanted to hear them. I didn't want to be blindsided. I didn't want to end up in a second divorce or, anything. And so if they had concerns, I wanted to hear them. Yeah. But if it was just about the timing, that's not, they don't get to control that.
Right. 100%. One thing I did want to just take us back to for a minute was, I teach my clients to date in person as well as online. So there is an art to showing up in spaces in a way that makes it possible for you to meet a good person if they are in that space. And you did exactly that.
Yeah. Yeah, that was not the goal. I was not even looking to date anyone 6 weeks after my divorce was final.
Yeah.
But it was
that typical of how you showed up every week at that meeting?
Yeah. Like, I mean, I'm just a really open, friendly, social person. And so if I saw someone that I didn't recognize, boy or girl, like man or woman, like I would go up and introduce myself and, try to help them feel like they knew somebody and bring them into the fold.
Yeah. And a lot of people think that that's just the job of the extroverts. Like,
well, I am an extrovert.
Yes, but the act of being visible in a space, I call it the visibility formula, the actual action line, like of being friendly to a person or welcoming someone or saying hello does not require you to be an extrovert.
Correct. Yes, I agree with that. 100%.
Yeah. So I just try to help my clients like out of the story.
Yes.
Just because they're an introvert, this is impossible for them. And it's not impossible.
Yeah.
I encourage them to show up as them with an openness to create connection. Yes. So what does that look like for, you as the individual? So for you, you probably greeted, I don't know, 10 people per week, maybe.
I mean, not really. I mean, it was usually just, 1 or 2. Really? But it, because I was fairly new as well. So I didn't know if they were, they just hadn't been for a few weeks and I hadn't seen them yet, or, or if they were new to this whole thing. But I just know that, I want to give what I would want. And so, walking into a situation like that, you're newly single, you don't know anyone there. It's, it can be very overwhelming. And so I understood that. And I wanted other people to feel like they were welcome and had a friend there right away.
Yeah. And that's like a whole skill, because sometimes for some people, there's discomfort.
Of course.
Walking up to someone.
Well, it's not like I was always super comfortable doing that, but I was willing to feel that discomfort and do it anyway, because I know I think, be the person that you want to be. Yes. And that's who I am. And I also, would have loved someone to do that to me.
So good. So, how soon after you met your husband did you get married?
So we met the end of November, of 2011, and we married, July 2nd, 2012. So it was about 9 months-ish.
So it wasn't like it was 8 weeks after you met.
No, although I totally would have. I was like ready to marry him right away. But I mean, he was in the process of, I mean, he was just newly divorced as well.
Mm-hmm. And so what did you spend that time doing?
So, I mean, we just spent that time, getting to know each other, and, spending, going on dates. And because we knew right away that we wanted to get married, but we knew we needed to take time to get our children into the right space. They were both just coming out of divorces themselves and a lot of changes. And so we were very mindful of their feelings. And so spending time, me with his kids, him with my kids, everybody together, all of that. So we could just kind of get used to each other. Then he was selling his house. So moving, and then we were buying a new house together.
Yeah.
And he moved in and wanted to get his kids settled for a couple of months before I moved in with my kids. So
yeah, 100%.
So we just, took our time doing that.
Yeah. What's been the most surprising thing about your second marriage?
I didn't know love like this was possible.
What does love look like for you?
I still get butterflies when I see him, and it's been more than 10 years. He's my safe place. He's who I can go to no matter what and share everything with. And, we've been through some really hard things together, and those hard things have brought us closer together, even when we didn't agree.
Yeah.
Rather than take us apart. We've both been really willing to work on ourselves and confront those hard parts of ourselves. And, there's been a lot of hard things, especially with our kids. I mean, but like he and I were talking the other night, and I'm like, have we ever had a disagreement that wasn't about our kids? And he was like, I don't think so. So like we've just been willing to, see things from the other person's perspective and drop expectations and realize that the relationships aren't necessarily going to look like what we thought they were going to look like. But that doesn't mean that it's not okay. So, and I think the thing is we feel like, our kids, we've got 2 kids that are already out of the house. They're in college and out of the house, and then 3 still left at home. And, we went through many years where it was really, really hard, still is, with our kids. But what we've always said is like, in the end, our kids are all going to grow up and leave us. And so the 2 of us need to make sure that we are strong together, that we have a relationship, the 2 of us, that's going to outlast all of our kids at home, so that when all of our kids leave, we're happy with the 2 of us.
Yeah. I mean, and isn't that just really the kernel of a personal growth journey?
Yes.
Is not to hang our self-worth. I mean, in this case, you had the marriage, but even as individuals, not to hang our life on our kids. I was talking to someone this week about like my business. I'm running my business. And then of course my teenagers have needs and there's all this schoolwork. And I was like, listen, if I had to, safeguard anyone's career, it's going to be mine. Right. I find myself spending so much time trying to get their grades up, get them to have good careers. And I'm like, I don't even have control.
Right.
Over what they're going to do. I should probably do my work.
Yeah.
Find a client.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think we parent very differently. So that's taken some adjusting, and, I don't always agree with what he does, and he definitely doesn't agree with what I do, but, we worked it out, and so that, we have a good family. And I mean, blending is hard, even in the best of circumstances. And we've blended pretty well, actually. I wouldn't say that, it's the most amazing thing in the whole world, but he and I are good. And that's the most important thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So you had mentioned that he was like your safe place, and safety is sort of one of those components of love that I try to talk to my clients about quite a bit.
Yeah.
Do you have like a little, like if a woman said, hey, I want to make sure I pick somebody who feels safe, who's kind, how would they know? Are you able to articulate what that emotional safety feels like with the person?
Yeah. I feel like he listens and he hears me, but he doesn't try to fix me. he just lets me be me and loves me no matter what that looks like.
Mm.
Even when I'm acting like a crazy person, which we all
As
do
we
sometimes.
all will from time to time.
Yes. But he's made it so that it's safe for me to be myself.
Yes. So you're not walking on eggshells. You're not
Yeah.
muting or editing what you're thinking or feeling or saying.
Right. And if I am, I know just, the coach in me, I know that it's a me issue and not a him issue.
Right. Yeah, 100%. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thanks for sharing your story. It's so good, like so good. But I wanted to make sure we made time to talk about sex and dating when you're a conservative Christian.
Yeah.
After your divorce.
Yeah, that's so hard.
I do have, my practice is pretty open. I serve Christian women. I serve non-Christian women. I serve non-binary people and women. I think my practice isn't directed to those who don't identify as women, but I do have one or two clients who have identified as a different gender. And this comes up.
Yeah, I'm sure it does.
By the time I get usually when my clients are dating in the early stages, they are, they're good. Sex is not an issue. Then they get into the relationship where they find someone that they are serious about. And we're talking 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks in, and then they start to come to me with questions.
Yes.
So I'll give you an example. One that has come up recently was this person wasn't intending to have sex with her partner. They'd only been dating for a couple of weeks, but she was having a lot of feelings in her body and didn't know what to do with them.
Yeah. Pretty normal.
She was like, I don't know what to do. What's going on here? So what would you say to that woman in that state? She has another question because 4 weeks down the line, it was a different question. Yeah. So she's a Christian. She doesn't want to have sex before marriage. She's feeling, as she put it to me, horny.
Yeah.
And she was like, Shadi, what do I do?
Well, the way that I always approach this with my clients, and I mean, most of my clients are conservative Christians or, just more conservative in nature. But I don't think it matters if you're Christian or not. I always phrase it in like, what is your value system? And are you living according to that? Are you in integrity with yourself? Because it's not my job to put a value system on other people, right? As a coach, like I'm going off of what they are. Now, most of my clients have the same value system that I do just because of our, religious beliefs. But, so for your client who's, feeling all these feelings, it's not a problem. Just because you're feeling them doesn't mean that you have to act on them if that is outside of your value system. So, I mean, I would probably say, be willing to just feel them. It's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
You don't have to act on them. And if you feel like you need to act on them, then act on them on your own rather than with another person. If that's within your value system.
Right. And I'm glad you brought up a value system because we did go, coach deeper. And the issue was she was unsure about her value system. That was the root of it. She was like, well, I don't want to do anything on my own because that's wrong. And I was like, okay, do you think that's wrong? Or is that something you were told? Like, tell me about why you feel this is wrong. Because if you feel it's wrong, why is there a struggle to be in integrity with what you believe?
Yes.
And she didn't know. She was like, well, actually, now that you mention it.
Right. We have to figure that out. Or else, because if we're living outside of our value system, outside of integrity with ourselves, we're never going to be happy.
Yeah.
But when we can understand our values and our belief systems and where they come from and why we believe that and be intentional with that, believe what we want to believe on purpose rather than just the conditioning that we've received from family, from religion, from society, all of that, then when we can live within that value system, then we're going to be happy, whatever that looks like, So it's not my job to impose my values on someone else. I'm very much like, what do you believe? What do you want to believe on purpose, and live within that?
Yeah.
That's what's going to make you happy.
Yeah. And that's what it means to be in integrity.
Yes.
Like I've heard like an explanation of the word integrity, which means wholeness. Like there are no cracks or like faults. And when you are at war inside, it means that there's a part of you that's out of integrity, or there's some thinking that's out of integrity.
Yeah.
And what most of us do is we just ignore it. We're just like, okay, well, as long as on the outside, I look like what I'm supposed to look like. And then the war is going on inside.
Yes. Yes. And, I define integrity very similarly, but also like, what are you going to do when no one else is looking?
Yes. Which brings me to the other question that my client did have. Because she's in this amazing relationship. It's like lovely. Everything's great. And it's interesting the work that shows up after.
For sure.
I'm like, listen, my job is to help you meet someone and keep it together. Where are all these questions coming from? Right.
Yeah.
And so she had the next question was, okay, they were going on this trip. Right. And he had booked a room. And I think she assumed it was going to have 2 beds, and then found out that it was 1 bed. And I was like, well, you can book like a separate room for yourself. Like,
right.
You have plenty of money. You're like, not,
yes.
This is not neither one of them needed to save money.
Okay.
And so I said, well, if you don't want to, have anything happen, why don't you just book a room of your own? And, you guys just hang out or whatever. And she didn't want to book a room of her own. And I was like, okay, so have you thought about what might happen? She's like, well, I don't think anything will happen. I'll make sure nothing happens. And I was like, okay, we are now in our 40s.
Yes.
Like, let's think about this situation. How would you talk about, this to a client? Sort of this little girl, naive attitude towards what could happen. Yeah. And the like, well, I just want to see, versus what we talked about, like really sitting with the values and making a decision.
Right. I mean, I would probably bring it back to values. Like, is that within your value system? And, when faced with those very real temptations, are you going to stick to your value system, or are you not? And what are the consequences going to be of that, whatever those decisions are? Like, if you're going to stick with it, do you like those results? Yeah. If you don't, do you like those results? Right. And whatever you decide is totally fine if it's going to give you the results that you want.
Right. And I think that's where the challenge comes in, is thinking that whatever the individual decides is totally okay. I think that's where my clients tend to struggle, is they don't think that they get to choose. Yeah. They believe it's been chosen for them.
Right. And so when we using the agency we have, the choice, when we don't feel like we get to choose, then we feel trapped, and we end up doing things a lot of times outside of our value system. But when we can, be intentional with our agency and have that freedom to choose what we want, whether that's within our value system or not, like, I think we're going to be happier in the long run.
Yeah. Yeah. What are some good questions a person could ask just to investigate their value system? Like, why do I believe what I believe? If I had to do it over again, would I choose this belief? I guess I just gave a couple of questions. What are your questions?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I really have my clients look at, what beliefs they have and where they come from. What did you learn from your family about sex and about, all whatever values they're looking at? What did you learn in your family situation? What do you believe about that today? Is that working for you today? What did you learn in your religion? Is that working for you? What did you learn from society? Is that working for you? What do you want to believe on purpose with all of these things? What results do you want? And does your current belief support those results or not?
I love that question. What result do you want? Yeah. I think that's one we should ask ourselves every day.
Right.
When we wake up, what results do I want today?
What results? I know I ask my clients that all the time, because my clients are, these women who feel like they just are never in the mood, and they've kind of come to not like sex because they're doing it just for him. It becomes duty and obligatory rather than about agency and freedom. Sex is about freedom. Like, if we don't have freedom, desire is not there. And so, so we have to start reframing these, like they don't feel like they want it, but yet their higher desire is to have a good sexual relationship with their spouse. So how do we reconcile those two things? Well, we have to figure out what they're believing about sex, about themselves, about sex, about their husbands, and really figure out those belief systems that they have now. And they're obviously not giving them the results that they want. So then we have to start changing things so they're actually getting the results that they want on a daily basis.
Yeah. And that work is so important, because when we think about sex, it's almost like even being in the mood or wanting it, for many women, it feels like that's out of their control, like something that just happens to them.
Right.
Like if the lightning hits me today.
Yes, because of how we've been taught about sex, from pornography, from media, different things, we think it's like this spontaneous thing. Desire is the spontaneous thing that happens out of the blue. And it can be that way for some. But desire is a feeling that's created by the way that we're thinking. And so like when you were in those early stages of your relationship and you had tons of desire, it wasn't just because it was spontaneously appearing. It's because you were thinking the thoughts that were creating it. You're creating all that fantasy, oh, I'm going to see him tonight. And what's he going to wear? And what am I going to wear? And is he going to hold my hand? And is he going to kiss me? And is he going to touch me? And you're like, all of those thoughts start creating all that fantasy and desire. That's what's driving it. That's what's creating it. It's not just happening out of nowhere. So then you get into like an actual relationship, and it's maybe not this, you're not thinking the same things. And you're like, where did my libido go? What happened? Because you're not thinking those things. Right. And so that's what we have to start to do, is start to see like, how can we change those processes? Now, sex is more than just mindset. It is very much in the body. And so a lot of us have trauma responses. And I mean, there's like the big T trauma that have happened from, abuse and assault and different things like that. But I'm talking more like little T trauma that, having years of obligatory sex is traumatizing, and it causes trauma in the body. And so, when you, maybe you're starting to change things and you want things to be different, but then your husband is, or, your boyfriend or whatever is saying, hey, let's do it tonight. And you start having anxiety and, all these feelings and you're starting to shut down. That's a trauma response. Yeah. So we have to work through the trauma and create safety in ourselves, back to that safety. Right. And so that we can engage and have that freedom again.
Wow, that is so powerful. And it's incredible how it just reinforces that the way we're thinking creates the results that we have. Because if you're in that mode where, it's passive, like a passive sex life, it's more than likely to just keep recreating more of the same, because then the gap gets wider and wider to make a change. Yes. It feels harder and harder, and the body settles into this mode like, hey, this is just how we are. Yes. And it reinforces the thought, oh, this is how it's going to be.
Yes. And then the other part of that, so most women are actually responsive desire. So we have spontaneous desire, which is what we see in the movies and what we think is happening when we're in those early stages. And a lot of men have spontaneous desire. Like they have the physiological drive from the testosterone. They have men have on average about 1,000 nanograms of testosterone per deciliter. Women at the age of 18 have 76. And by the time we're 40, it's half that. So we don't have the same physiological drive that men do for sex. It's all up in our brain, right? But the spontaneous desire means that our desire kicks in after arousal. So we think we're supposed to have desire, and then we can move into the arousal, and that's good. But for most women, desire happens after arousal. So you have to be willing to engage. I mean, how many times were we like, yeah, I really don't want it, but then I did it and it was really good. And I was so glad I did it. That's because that desire kicked in after you started to get aroused. You're like, oh yeah, I do like this. Right.
Yeah.
And so
that's so true.
If you could just understand that for most women, your desire comes after arousal, and just be willing to engage, knowing that most likely your body's going to kick in and it's going to come, that can change everything.
Wow, that's such powerful wisdom. Thank you so much, Amanda.
Yeah.
I'm like, ladies, all right. Let's willing to engage, go through that little river, and then it
Yes.
kicks in.
Yes.
That sounds amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story and sharing your expertise with my listeners. I really appreciate it. I think this has been such a powerful, conversation. There's not a lot of places that you go to just, talk about sex. So I appreciate you having a podcast, which, yeah, we need to mention that you have a podcast.
Yes, I do. It's called Sex for Saints. So it's all about sex and marriage from a conservative Christian perspective. So I literally talk about everything just with my strong values backing that up. So I get lots of people who are not even Christian that listen just because it's really good information. But
awesome. And then where can the listeners find you if they want to follow you, or if they want to, contact you? Can they find you on the internet?
Yeah. So my website is amandalauder.com. Lauder's Louder. I'm loud. And there you can learn about, so I have the Embrace You Elite Society, which is just open to anyone who wants to join, where we have a video course that you go through and then coaching calls as much as you need. So it's a really, really awesome program that I'm just adding more and more to. And then I do retreats for couples and women. I have a couples retreat coming up in October, and then my next women's retreat will be next February, but it's already open for registration and selling out quickly. So
awesome.
So that's fun. Yeah. And then on Instagram, you can just find me at Amanda Lauder Coaching.
Perfect. And we're going to link all of these up in the show notes. I want to encourage everyone to follow Amanda. I believe that we've probably just scratched the surface of how far we can take this conversation about sex, but I really appreciate you coming on here. This has been so eye-opening. Thank you for being here today. And listeners, check Amanda's podcast, Sex for Saints, out and click on her links in the show notes. If you enjoyed this conversation, please leave a review, and you can follow me on Instagram at Shade Curry. And I have a free dating course available. You can also click on that in the show notes. Thank you for your time and attention, and I will see you next time.